Alright everyone, Anthem. The game comes out in a little less than 3 weeks for Origin Access Premier subscribers on February 15th, and everyone else who bought the game will get to play it on February 22nd. I really do hate the fact that the game isn't coming out at the same time for everyone, but I digress. I'm not here to talk about EA shenanigans, I'm here to talk about BioWare's game proper. Those who pre-order the game or have an Origin Access Premier membership will have a chance to enjoy a VIP demo of Anthem from January 25th to January 27th, and after that, there will be an open demo that anyone will be able to check out from February 1st to February 3rd, so be on the lookout for that. I myself managed to gain access to the ongoing VIP demo and clock in about 4 hours of gameplay last night, and given I've always expressed cautious interest in Anthem, I figured I'd share my first impressions with you guys. Let's start by discussing what I really liked about the game. One thing that I never doubted about Anthem based on footage I saw was that BioWare would nail the game's core mechanics, and during my time with a VIP demo, I was glad to discover that for the most part, I was right. It's very easy to get the hang of the controls, running, dashing, and flying all feel very tight and responsive, and it all flows very well into the game's solid third-person shooting mechanics. If you ever wondered what it would be like to play as Iron Man in a video game, honestly, nothing else comes closer than Anthem. Zipping around using all your mobility options to evade and close in on enemies while deploying your various combat tools feels genuinely empowering and satisfying, and I don't think there's anything quite like it. So far, I've tested out 2 of the game's 4 javelins, the Ranger and the Interceptor. The former has a good balance of offensive and defensive capabilities, while the latter focuses a lot more on speed and maneuverability, what I like to call the Warframe class, as the Interceptor definitely gives you that ninja feel. I quite enjoyed how distinct they both felt in action, with each encouraging different styles of play via their varying mobility and melee attacks and their unique abilities and ultimates. The ultimates in particular can be quite fun to unleash, with the Ranger deploying a barrage of homing missiles to locked-on targets, and the Interceptor going full-on invincible ninja samurai mode. Now, mobility, melee attacks, abilities, and ultimates seem to be where differences end, as when it comes to primary and secondary weapons, any javelin can wield any weapon in whatever configuration the player desires, which I think is great. I do wish guns had more oomph though. They currently don't feel very impactful, which can be attributed to a combination of weak sound effects and lackluster reactions from enemies. My one big qualm with the game's core mechanics is that flight feels very imprecise with keyboard and mouse controls. The way flight works is that you have to drag a cursor around the screen using the mouse, and you'll fly in the direction that the cursor is situated outside the center. It basically feels like trying to control a giant on-screen analog stick with a mouse, and if you don't manually reset the on-screen analog stick by recentering the cursor, you might find yourself unintentionally drifting in different directions that you didn't want to go to. While I'm sure this all works great using a controller, as physical analog sticks are designed to automatically recenter when flicked in a direction, a mouse always stays wherever you drag it to. So the way it should work with keyboard and mouse is that the cursor is always center and follows the camera when you drag the mouse around. While it's not impossible to get the hang of how flight currently works on keyboard and mouse, it also makes it very difficult to quickly fly away in a specific direction or pull off certain maneuvers in the heat of battle and during frantic situations, leading to much frustration. Hopefully this is something they'll be able to fix before the game officially launches, especially since there are so many players out there who favor the precision of aiming and shooting with a mouse. That aside though, the game overall feels very responsive, empowering, and quite fun to play. I also found myself relatively impressed by the expansiveness of the game's open world. There's a ton of verticality that takes full advantage of the versatile mobility that your javelin offers, which paves the way for some cool landscapes, environments, and vistas. Now, in the few hours I played, I did find myself feeling like there was a lack of environmental variety, with most of my playtime having taken place in samey-looking forested areas or underground caverns, but there are plenty of regions in the open world that I have yet to explore, so I'll reserve judgment on environmental variety until I see everything the final game has to offer. Some of Anthem's art design also deserves commendation, with the javelins looking pretty badass, particularly when you delve into the game's flexible cosmetic cosmetic customization system, and Fort Tarsis is strewn with all kinds of interesting knickknacks and designs that help sell the illusion of this distinct universe. Speaking of which, I must say that I truly do love this game's customization system. You can change everything from the color scheme to the texture and material of your javelin's different components. You can purchase new cosmetic designs for various body parts, and you can really go all out with how you express yourself. You can also easily save configurations, copy and adjust them, and there are just a lot of convenient features that make customization as painless as possible. There isn't anything like Destiny 2's crappy shader system to deal with. You're not going to be paying $18 just to paint your power armor blue. You've got an entire color wheel at your disposal to play around with as you wish. Now, there are cosmetic items you will have to unlock by either spending coins earned in-game or shards bought with real money, and these items range from new textures, new vinyls, to new body part designs for your javelins. But the hope is that this stuff can be earned through gameplay reasonably enough that the inclusion of premium currency won't be a huge issue, though we'll probably have to wait until the game finally releases to make a proper deliberation. The customization system is where you'll also be able to pick out your javelin's loadout, comprised of items of varying rarity earned after completing missions or by looting chests found in the world. Equipment can range from weapons to components that enhance your javelin's stats to various other equipable tools that offer abilities mapped to various shortcuts on your controller. Speaking of weapons, there's quite a variety of them, ranging from pistols, machine guns, assault rifles, sniper rifles, shotguns, you name it, it's all there, the standard stuff, each intended for different purposes. Combined with the unique attributes that each javelin offers, there are a lot of ways to tailor Anthem's playstyle to your preference, which is fantastic. Now let's talk about some of the things that I didn't like so much. As phenomenal as Anthem's core mechanics are, the game runs into the problem of activities you partake in being the same monotonous affair. While missions give you different context, the structure of every mission I played essentially bogged down to going from point A to point B, killing waves of enemies, going to point C, killing more waves of enemies, and once in a while maybe collecting or destroying a few things along the way to open the passage to your next destination. Throughout my playtime, I pretty much rinsed and repeated that process over and over again, and once the initial novelty of the javelin's fun core mechanics wore off, I found myself feeling rather bored by the dull and stale repetition. Now, the game's boss battles do definitely add a bit of spice, so if the game can ship with lots of cool and unique bosses, perhaps it'll compensate for some of the monotony. They are your typical bullet sponge affair, but their unique attack patterns and gimmicks make these encounters more engaging than your typical horde of enemies. But yeah, other than killing waves of enemies, there just doesn't seem like there's much else to do in missions or when free roaming the open world. As much as I appreciate the expansiveness and scale of the world, I couldn't help but notice how barren it overall felt. As you fly around, you may occasionally find a pack of enemies standing idly by, or you'll occasionally find crafting materials strewn about to collect, but I didn't see any dynamic environmental interactions and scenarios akin to what was hinted at in the original E3 presentation. I have yet to encounter any seemingly minor events in the world whose trail you can follow that could eventually lead to a larger mission or discovery. As a result, the world just doesn't feel as alive as I'd hoped, with the general vibe being that it's more of a pretty sandbox with a few groups of idle enemies littered here and there. It gets the job done as this place where BioWare can host various missions, but since there isn't really anything too compelling to discover, I hardly found much reason to explore. I was also surprised by how compartmentalized the open world really is, with loading screens presenting themselves at almost every juncture, a stark contrast from the E3 2017 gameplay reveal that seemed to hint at a relatively seamless world. I also wasn't particularly impressed by Fort Tarsis either, a town that felt woefully artificial and nothing like the lively, buzzing, and reactive hub Anthem's gameplay reveal made it out to be. Crowd size and crowd interaction in particular seemed very minimal within Fort Tarsis, and when you do approach the town's inhabitants, you'll find that they're stuck in these awkward idle animations where they pretend they're talking to each other, but their lips and eyes aren't moving, so it just makes them look like robotic mannequins rather than actual people, and it really took me out. It doesn't help matters that all you hear when walking around Fort Tarsis is this really flat, cheap-sounding, incessant, generic crowd noise, which doesn't match the relatively vacant-feeling town that's being visually represented, which only ends up further contributing to the artificial feel. Granted, there are a handful of NPCs you can interact and exchange some dialogue with. Unfortunately, most of them were not available in the demo, but the few NPCs I did interact with were a mixed bag. I wasn't particularly thrilled by the performances and dialogue I listened to thus far either, as they sounded somewhat unnatural.
Look who's back in one piece.
Zoe, did you expect me in more pieces than one?
You? Never.
It reminded me a lot of Mass Effect Andromeda, where it feels like every character is always trying to say something clever and funny, making them come off as juvenile. I don't mind juvenile characters, mind you, I don't mind lightheartedness if it was clearly intentional, but when everyone seems to have been written to constantly want to throw in cheesy one-liners in every conversation, it makes it harder to take character interactions and narrative development seriously. The gravitas and seriousness of situations become diluted by the poorly written dialogue. I did meet a few interesting personalities though, like this one quirky bartender who's constantly seeking advice from you about dealing with girls, and then there was the main mission giver for this demo, Matthias, who at one point in the story multiplies into 3, each housing a different aspect of the character's personality in a very Rick and Morty type of scenario, and that paved the way for some fun and interesting banter and developments. Perhaps 4 Tarsis will grow on me more in the final game when I'm able to speak to more of the numerous NPCs who are locked in this demo, but I also don't feel like it'll mitigate how barren and artificial the town feels and how poorly animated the general crowd looks. Though who knows, maybe the town will evolve and grow as you play through the game, and maybe then it'll change my mind? We'll see. Speaking of animation, you may recall Mass Effect Andromeda's facial animation became a major point of contention and ridicule, so I've been wondering how BioWare would fare with Anthem. From what I've seen, it's a mixed bag. Some characters do seem like they were properly animated with lots of little details and nuances, particularly within the game's story cutscenes, while others have that dreaded and all too familiar deadpan stare. I get that they can't fully animate the faces of every single NPC, and I get that they have to prioritize which characters and scenes are worth fully animating, but it still feels like they could have done a better job. Unfortunately, with the game only a few weeks out, I don't expect that this is an aspect that will be improved much before the final release. Now, something they absolutely have to get sorted out before February 15th are the server issues, game crashes, and show-stopping bugs that currently plague the experience. It took quite a while since the VIP demo went live before many people could finally log in and play the game, and I had a similar experience. Fortunately, server issues do seem to have stabilized somewhat in the next few hours, though the problem hasn't been completely resolved quite yet. Server issues aside, there are also 3 times in which I was forced to restart the game. The first time was when the game just flat out crashed while I was customizing my javelin, with none of my customization progress having saved when I logged back in. The second time, I died in the open world and got stuck there because the game would not respawn me, despite a prompt stating that I would be respawned soon. Most frustrating of all, though, was the third time when I was deep into the stronghold featured in this demo, which is basically a raid, when suddenly, out of the blue, I was taken into a loading screen that got stuck at 95%, a prevalent issue dubbed the infinite load screen that has afflicted quite a few players. I closed the game out and restarted it to see if I could resume where I left off, but I was just taken back to Fort Tarsis with all my progress lost, at which point I was just too frustrated to keep playing, so I just called it a day right there and then. Another maddening occurrence was that after I completed the demo's final mission, the ensuing cutscene played for a bit and then got stuck. The game hadn't crashed or anything, as I could skip the cutscene, it's just that it wouldn't play and was frozen no matter what I did, so I had no choice but to skip it and miss out on crucial story details. This is definitely worrying. The game's a little less than 3 weeks out, and it still feels like there are a lot of vital kinks to work out. I haven't even talked about the rubber banding issues that many people are experiencing, which happened to me on multiple occasions too. Do keep in mind though that this is a demo version of the game, so there is a lot that could change or be fixed in the weeks leading up to the final release. It's possible many of my complaints will be addressed or mitigated once I delve deeper into the full game's contents, and that BioWare will be able to fix game-breaking issues before the first wave of players get their hands on the full version of Anthem on February 15th. That's the whole point of stress testing the game before release, after all, to gather data and make necessary final adjustments. It's better to get this stuff out of the way now. At the same time, EA-published games do have an unfortunate track record of releasing with myriad issues even after hosting betas to stress test their live services, so whether Anthem will be able to get its shit together by launch date is still a toss-up, I would say. The hope, though, is that 3 weeks will be enough time to get everything sorted out, since all things considered, there is a fun game here, fun that's primarily supported by really solid Iron Man-esque core mechanics, though whether the game will feature a compelling variety of activities and missions to bring out the best of a solid foundation and keep players invested for the long term remains to be seen. If you're a fan of shooter-looters that involve long stretches of grind, I feel like Anthem will be right up your alley and offer a very distinct feel from other games in the genre. But if you're looking for a traditional BioWare experience, that's definitely something you're not gonna find here. In terms of story, there really wasn't much to glean at, as the demo is fairly limited in scope, so I won't comment on that until I play the entirety of Anthem's campaign. Not a big fan of how dialogue choices only have 2 options though, and I never got the sense that the choices I made mattered all that much, though perhaps there will be situations in the final game in which they'll have bigger influence on certain outcomes. Though I'm not expecting anything on the scale of BioWare's past single-player endeavors. So yeah, overall, really solid core shooter-looter gameplay and a great customization system, marred by a relatively barren and artificial-feeling world, a lack of mission variety, underwhelming interactions with NPCs, and major game-breaking issues that need to be resolved before launch are my general first impressions of the Anthem demo. I'll remind you again that my opinions may change dramatically once I play the final game, for better or for worse, so be on the lookout for a more comprehensive review down the line. For now though, that's all I have to say, and I think everyone should at least give the demo a try, especially during the open demo that starts from February 1st and ends on February 3rd. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what your experience has been like with the game if you've managed to gain access to the VIP demo in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out!